Hey guys, it's me, Mr. 250, and welcome back to Umineko. A fun bit of fun we had back there. Eva and Hideyoshi are gone. Which I feel a little bad about Hideyoshi, honestly, I really do. But man, Eva, I mean seriously, chill out. Which I guess we don't have to worry about her anymore. Having problems. The only problem now is that if you don't count the servants, there's really only one adult left. If you also don't count Kinzo. Which is, I don't know, I feel like it's gonna kind of make the sense of power go away when the adults are kind of disappearing. But, regardless, let's continue from here. Natsui proclaimed it as though she didn't care whether we agreed or not. She probably doesn't. If anyone had a right to object, it would have been George. But he looked as though he'd shed enough tears. George nodded slightly, still facing away from us. And when he stood up, everyone else agreed too. The letter in the head's Western-style envelope that Natsui picked up still hadn't been opened. But now that we had decided to leave the room, she decided to unseal it in the parlor where everyone could watch. Probably a good idea. As soon as we walked out into the hallway to head back to the parlor, some of us immediately felt something out of place. Or maybe sensed something strange. Text boxes? I thought so. Definitely strange. Dead bodies? Maybe? Dead grandpa? When everyone sniffed the air, they did notice a horrible burnt smell drifting through the hallway. One that none of us had smelled until then. Now the house is on fire! Quick, get to the guest house! After noticing a burnt smell, it was natural that Kumasawa, who had been using the fire in the kitchen, suspected that her own clumsiness had caused it. Kumasawa hastily dashed away. Kano, Kumasawa to ikinasai. Hitori ni sasenai you. After nodding at Genji's order, Kanon followed after her. He wasn't running, but as he followed her, he tried to search for the cause of the smell in other directions as well. It truly is. Natsui was reluctant to open a window into the situation where self-defense was so important. Oh gosh, George is gonna turn into like the one dead set on finding the culprit, and then once finding them, stabbing them with a knife 27 times. It seemed that George still hadn't climbed out of the abyss of his sorrow. All that filled his chest now was the quiet flame of hatred towards the culprit who had stolen the lives of his beloved parents. And, of course, Shannon. Exactly.
シャッターの鍵を使用人室からこっそりと持ち出したのだろうとか、あるいは複製の鍵を持っていた可能性とか、いくつか方法が想像できた。でも、チェーンは違う。
And this is true. Now, here's another idea. A little bit on the, the fringe of believability, to be sure. But what if, Eva, or what if Hideyoshi just had enough of her? He just couldn't stand her in her stupid voice, kind of like me right now. So he decided to kill her, and then he went to take a bath, because he felt, he wanted to get the blood off his hands, and he just so happened to have another one of those pointy, stabby knife things. He slipped, and it hit him in the head, and he died. Yeah, I'm thinking that's a little far-fetched, but the possibility's still there.
チェーンは一般に浸透した施錠方法の中で 最もシンプルに密室を構築できる。
チェーンだけは物理的に破壊しない限り外からはどうにもならないぜ。
And we've received proof that it wasn't physically broken.
じゃあつまり犯人は扉からは出入りしなかった。
Unless, of course, well, I mean, we do have Kumasawa to back up Cannon, but what if they're in on it together? What if what we saw was only the idea of Cannon and Kumasawa finding the bodies? What if they actually killed them? Probably not either, but possible.
つい数時間ほど前にも扉以外でどうやって部屋から出入りしたのかってみんなで騒いだ気がするぜ。
Though then again, I am thinking now, so far the game hasn't done it, but wouldn't it just be the most interesting thing if the game suddenly became an unreliable narrator? Just saying. Back then, everyone had been making a fuss over how grandfather had disappeared from his room. Because of the receipt that Aunt Eva had stuck in the door on a whim, it was revealed that the door had remained sealed. And since Aunt Natsui had been the only person to enter or exit during that time, she had been under suspicion. Aunt Eva had proposed a theory about how Aunt Natsui might have thrown grandfather out the window and left by the door herself. But this door is much simpler. It was sealed from the inside by a door chain. The window had also been closed from the inside, and the bodies had been in the room. This time, it had been, without exaggeration, a truly closed room. That's right. If you include grandfather's disappearance, 3 cases have occurred, and all 3 times, the door has been the point of interest. 1, I suppose. The first was a shutter. There was a key in the servant room, and if we assume someone knew that, this can't really be called a closed room. Obviously. We have the door sealed by the receipt. However, since Aunt Natsui had entered the room, then if grandfather had left through the window or been thrown out, she would have been able to lock the window before escaping. Or, like my theory, he could have hidden until the receipt was gone and left the room later. Basically, this door can be defeated with a handful of desperate tricks. In that sense, you really can't call this one a closed room either. But this, on the other hand, is a closed room. Finally, we have to give up. The window, the door, everything had been locked. It was a perfect closed room. The first hadn't been a closed room because everyone could be suspected. The second hadn't been a closed room because Aunt Natsui could be suspected. But this time, no one can be suspected. The room was a perfect closed room because everyone had been sealed outside, just as completely as everyone else because of the door chain.
なら、犯人は室内に入らずに犯行に及んだ。部屋の外から何らかの方法で。
What, you mean like opening the door just a little bit and then like chucking a blade at both of them?
確かに。チェーンである以上、人が通れるほどは開けなくても。
Are they seriously gonna say that? Stick your forehead near the door so I can throw it at it.
ノックして顔を覗かせたところを襲うとか。
Yeah, but why would, I mean, maybe, you could say maybe she was on the bed, but why would he be in the bathroom if that were true? I don't think so.
甘いか。
甘いよな。エヴァおばさんの遺体が扉のすぐそばだったなら。
Yeah, she was just way too far for that to be feasible. I like that they're having this conversation in front of Beatrice's portrait. I have a feeling they're gonna look at it in a second and realize maybe it was Beatrice.
だが、エヴァおばさんは部屋の奥のベッドの上。しかも、秀吉おじさんはバスルームだった。チェーンの隙間からでは姿を見ることもできねえし、手を伸ばすこともできねえ。ちくしょう、全然ダメだぜ。さっぱりだ。
Something was tugging softly at my sleeve. I bet Maria's gonna be the one that mentioned Beatrice, right?
Oh,
Oh, she's been waiting for this, hasn't she?
バトラは親族の誰かを疑うのが嫌だから、犯人はベアトリーチェであってほしいと願ったよ。だからベアトリーチェは叶えた。
I suppose that's true, didn't
バ
she?
トラが言った通り、 絶対に人間には無理なことをして、バトラに魔女の存在を信じさせてくれた。なのにわがまま。
I tapped Maria, who was laughing unpleasantly on the head with my fist.
ああ、叶えてくれてありがとうよ。今のはその礼と、不謹慎な時に笑ったことへの教育的指導だ。それより教えやがれ。エヴァおばさんたちの部屋の扉にも、また怪しげな落書きがされていた。あれもまた魔法陣なのか。
あれは特に覚えやすい特徴的な形なんだから、あのくらい知っててほしいね。
知らねえから花を持たせてやってんだ。ごちゃごちゃ言わねえで解説しろい。
バトラは暴力的だね。
You could say Beatrice is pretty violent too, you know.
あんまり意地悪すると教えないよ。言うよこのげんこつ男。あれは月の1の魔法陣だよ。
何の意味がある？その魔法陣のご利益は？書かれてるヘブライ語の意味は？
記されているのは旧約聖書詩編第107編の16節。主は聖堂の扉を破り、鉄の缶抜きを打ち破ってくださいました。
Is that in reference to the chain on the door?
魔法陣の効用は2つ。
Breaking through chains?
1つはいかなる方法によって閉ざされた扉でも開くことができる。
Well, that has to do with the broken gates thing, doesn't it?
そりゃ便利な魔法だぜ。
Yeah, doesn't it?
つまり魔法の力に頼らなきゃ開けぬ密室の扉っていう。もう一つの効用は？
開かぬ扉を八方塞がりの事態に見立て扉を開く。難解な事態の時に用いることで、それまで思いつきもしなかった解決策を与えてくれるんだよ。平たく言うと、観察力や洞察力、ひらめきや直感を授けてくれるんだね。
Useful power to be sure.
ベアトリーチェはバトラごとき人間風情に、この扉の開き方がわかるものかって挑発してるんだよ。
よーし、もう黙れご苦労。
Good work, so shut up.
上等だぜ。その魔女の挑戦受けて。
マリアちゃん、この世に魔女も悪魔も存在しない。父さんと母さんは誰かが殺した。それが僕のよく知る人間なのか知らない人間なのかはわからない。でもそのどちらであっても必ず人間なんだ。
しかしどうやって？せいぜい10センチ程度しか開かない扉の隙間からどうやったら室内の2人を？
それにしても耐え難い匂いです。一体何事なのですか
Let's check grandfather's room. Before they even reached the kitchen, Kanon and Kumasawa, who had gone ahead, realized that the smell wasn't coming from there. That was because, on their way to the kitchen, they realized that an even thicker wave of stench was rising up the stairs from the stairs leading to the basement.
ボイラー室。またボイラーの調子が悪いんでしょうか。
Oh man, it's got a dead body shoved in it and it's rotting. Those stairs led to the underground boiler room. The mansion's boiler was old and in poor condition. Both of them had witnessed problems with the boiler on several occasions, but they had never smelled the boiler belching out a stench like this. Slam.
今の音は
Kanon's face, the face of pure horror. The sound that they had heard from the basement had definitely been the sound of a door closing. Kumasawa tried to speak, as though asking a question, but she already realized that the sound couldn't have been anything else. Kumasawa was so surprised at the sound that her knees gave way yet again and she cowered. Because, at that very moment, no one could have been in the boiler room. Why not? Oh. Just a few seconds ago, everyone had been crowded around Eva and Hideyoshi's room. I don't know, it could have been, Kinzo. He's been on the loose. So who caused the sound of a door closing just now? Or possibly the hobo in the woods? After taking a second to sort out the situation, Cannon ran down towards the basement. Since they had heard the sound of a door closing just now, and there was no trace of someone climbing the stairs, it meant that the person who had closed the door was now inside the boiler room. If the boiler room had been a dead end, Cannon wouldn't have rushed in so hastily. But Cannon was a servant, so he knew. There were two entrances, one that opened to the mansion and one that opened to the courtyard. If he didn't chase them now, they might slip away. Kumasawa reached the same conclusion long after Cannon did. But she couldn't let him go alone. If the thing in the boiler room was the culprit, an opponent who had easily killed 6 adults in the first murder, then no matter how Cannon confronted them, he wouldn't be a match. Of course, with this argument, even if Kumasawa joined him, it wouldn't change anything. At any rate, after a delay, Kumasawa decided that she mustn't let Cannon go alone, and she dashed down the stairs. Ooh, this is exciting. Slightly nervous music. Oh, lots of dark spaces people could hide. Good to know, good to know. At that time, Cannon was already in the boiler room. The boiler room's characteristic damp heat tormented him. It had always been an unpleasantly smelly and hot place. And, on top of that, the room was full of that horrible stench, which made Cannon feel like he was going to be sick. There was no doubt that this room was the origin. In that case, Cannon should have been searching where the smell was coming from. However, Cannon kept gazing forward as he grabbed a hatchet from a tool shelf just off to the side of the door. Good move. That's something that's probably filed under smart, possibly. He hadn't stretched out his hand because he wanted a hatchet. He had wanted to grab a weapon, any weapon. Why? Well, because you might be dealing with the culprit here. Cannon gazed into the darkness where the naked light bulb couldn't pierce. Then he answered.
ルーレットは数字と赤黒にかけて配当を競い合う。だが赤か黒かのようなリスクの低い賭けはその程度の配当しか与えられない。
Very true. The words coming from Cannon's mouth were swallowed up by the darkness. That darkness suddenly started to swirl, glittering. Ah, it was Beatrice that closed the door. Who would have guessed? Hi there, Beatrice. Nice butterflies you got. It was a very fantastical scene. Golden sparkling butterflies that hid in the shadows all over the boiler room flapped their wings, twinkling beautifully, and gathered in the darkness, disappearing. Cannon continued speaking, directing his words at the darkness as it swallowed the butterflies up. But as the butterflies gathered in the darkness, they they must have laughed. But Cannon continued to speak without faltering in the slightest.
逆により的中率の低いかけ方をすれば、親方様は天文学的なリスクを的中できることを奇跡、その結果得られる天文学的な配当を魔法と呼んでいた。親方様とお前がどんな魔法を求めてルーレットに挑んでいるのか、
You're doing that eye thing again,
そんなことに
Cannon.
は興味ない。しかしルーレットには赤でも黒でもない目が出うることを忘れている。
Roulette has a special pocket called Zero, which means that the house takes everything in certain variants of the game. This means that all of the coins bet on the table will be swept up, just as though everyone is forfeit.
僕は一つだけ心に決めていた。もしシャノンが殺されて僕が生き残るようなことがあったなら、この身を投げ出して お前のルーレットをすべて台無しにしてやろうと。これは親方様が決めたルールでも、ましてやお前が決めたルールでもない。このルールは僕が作った。僕は
Oh man. Oh man, Canon, making your own decisions. There we go. Canon's face was twisted with humiliation. It was clear that his self-restraint was being ridiculed somehow. Canon's brow creased even further, and a furious expression that Canon had never shown anyone appeared on his face. The hand grasping the hatchet was shaking. His sweat became drops which slid down. It was clear that the emotion causing Canon's hand to shake was not anger alone. However, Canon suppressed that emotion.
僕はもうお前の言葉に惑わされたりはしない。悪魔のルーレットはこれでおしまいだ。地獄にてさらに1000年。次の召喚者を待つがいい。ベアトリーチェ!
When Canon swung the hatchet upwards and tried to dive into the darkness defiantly sneered. It sneered at that courage as vulgar, lazy, futile, and meaningless. Whoa. Uh-oh. I have a bad feeling about Canon. His hatchet still held aloft. Couldn't take another step after that. With a clang, the hatchet that Canon had been grasping fell and rolled on the floor. And following that, with a pair of thuds, Canon's knees hit left, then right. That hand, which looks like it was trying to catch the sky now that the hatchet had been dropped, gradually lowered, landing on his chest. Then the other hand did the same. Right there, a handle with a demon-shaped design was buried in his chest. The same type of weapon that had been stabbed into Eva and Hideyoshi's foreheads was in Canon's chest. I'm gonna say that was on the low end of your smart ideas, Canon. The hatchet was the smart idea. The threatening Beatrice is on the low end, I'd have to say. Canon was curled up in anguish, fresh blood dribbling from the corner of his mouth. It was makeup over Canon's white skin. Around the scene, the glittering gold butterflies danced through the darkness, mesmerizing. It was a beautiful, beautiful dance, a funeral march of tribute, ridicule, and contempt for a single boy's self-sacrifice. Canon had already been prepared for his own death. But although he could do nothing but accept the death he had received, he attempted one last measure of resistance. He grasped the handle of the weapon sticking into his chest with both hands, and gritting his teeth with an acute, unearthly pain, he pulled it out. For only a moment, a bright red spray gushed out. It made an unpleasant bloop sound. It probably resembled the sound of Canon's soul as it was sucked into the swamp of the dead.
Canon-san?
Yeah, this isn't good for you, Kumasawa. I know it's supposed to be all serious and stuff, but every time she screams, it makes me laugh. On the inside. Kumasawa screamed at the incomprehensible sight in front of her. Canon was lying in a pool of blood. Kumasawa's heart was a complete mess. Ah, what a horrible fate. He wouldn't have been killed if I was with him. Ah, what incredible luck. If I had been with him, I might have been killed too. Is she really thinking that? Ooh. I guess it's confusion. Yeah, I guess. As she screamed, her expression was filled with complete confusion, And all of the muscles of her face were pulled up, as though she was smiling while crying. No one could have made fun of an expression such as this. The first one to dash in was Natsui, holding the rifle. Battler and Genji dashed in after her. Normally, they probably would have started discussing the origin of that violent stench filling the boiler room. But after they saw Cannon, who was lying in the ground as if drowning in a ocean of his own blood, the stench wasn't important anymore. I don't think Dr. Nanja is going to be able to help. Natsui realized that even though Cannon was on the verge of death, he was still conscious, so she sent Genji to get the doctor. Natsui, holding the rifle aloft, faced the darkness in the center of the boiler room and shouted, Battler, thinking quickly, took a large flashlight from the tool shelf alongside the door and used its light to cut through the darkness Natsui was glaring into. But the light only shone on mechanical-looking piping in a door. The door had been left open a small crack, and it was obvious that someone had left through here in a hurry. Wow, Natsui, you don't even know. Battler let out a war cry as he slammed into the door. Cool air from outside suddenly rushed in. There were some thin, rough stairs leading up. Battler ran up them shouting. Natsui was also rushing up the stairs, chasing after Battler. They were in the courtyard. The courtyard of the mansion had been built strictly for lighting purposes, so it wasn't a very elegant place. Because it was surrounded on all sides, the air was calm and completely undisturbed, even though they could hear the sound of strong winds. There was only the gentle, sorrowful rain. As he ran through the cold and scattered raindrops, dashing up the stairs into the courtyard, Battler looked in every direction. Of course, the odds of him finding a suspicious silhouette just standing around nonchalantly were pretty much zero. Battler turned around, looking in all directions. He turned again and again. He kept spinning until he almost lost his sense of direction. He prayed that he would see the culprit somewhere in the scenery. But there was no chance. All he saw as he spun was more and more and more of the mansion's heartless walls and windows. Furthermore, there were two entrances into the mansion from the courtyard, and neither of them were locked. Because the courtyard couldn't be entered from the outside of the mansion, the doors had been built without locks. He didn't know which one they had left through. He had to give up. Battler pounded the wall with his fist, swearing. Battler put his head against the wall and scratched at it with his fingernails as he cried. Battler was a boy who could understand the feelings of pain and regret in a person's heart. So he cried. with all of his strength. Natsui, who had always thought of Battler as a frank person, was a little surprised to find that he had this delicate side. And at the same time, understood how easily hurt the heart of a young person could be, so she held him. I don't think it's alright.
あなたもジョージ君もマリアちゃんもジェシカも母として、そして後宮家の代表として。
Battler, after sobbing into Natsui's chest for a while, wiped his tears with a bitter smile, as though he had been like that the whole time, and tried to appear as though he had cried more than enough already.
とにかく一度下に戻りましょう。犯人を探すより自分たちの身を守る方が最優先です。明日になれば船が来る。
Hopefully.
そうすれば警察がやってきて、全てを白日のもとにさらし出してくれるでしょう。犯人がどうあがこうとも、この島から逃げられるものですか。
そうっすね。警察さえ来れば。
When the seagulls cry, the crime will be solved. But, for some reason, Battler felt a slight sense of uneasiness, as if the seagulls would never cry again. That couldn't be true. When the typhoon passes, the lively seagulls should return to the harbor again. Hopefully. Oh boy, more people are dead. Well, we only got 2 servants now? We're going to stop here for today. Well, we'll stop here for right now. I think I'm going to make another video. But yeah, we'll stop here. We got... I didn't hear the sound, so they haven't updated Canon's thing yet. But we'll probably see that next episode. It might even be like the next line or something. So we got 2 servants, the kids, Natsui, and Nanjo. And Kinzo's somewhere else. So yeah, we'll be back here in just a moment.